Hello, everyone. So, after living a decade in the US and about 3 years in Canada, I wanted to give you my input about the similarities and differences that I see between Canada and the US. So, contrary to popular belief in Canada, the US and Canada have a lot more similarities than people here think. So, honestly speaking, Canadians might pride themselves as not being Americans and being completely different and more civilized, but there's actually a lot of similarities between Canadians and Americans. There's also a lot of differences, but they're more on the political and economic system levels. So, at the level of government, there's more differences. Obviously, they're completely different systems, but in terms of society and culture, they're quite similar. So, in terms of similarities, you might find that the culture in Seattle and Vancouver is a lot closer than Vancouver to Calgary, for example. Calgary and Denver have a very similar culture. Likewise, Toronto and Chicago might have similar culture. So it's not even about differences between the countries and the cities within those countries, but sometimes you might have more similarities between a certain region. So the Pacific Northwest, as in Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver, have more in common than Vancouver and Calgary does, for example. Likewise, the East Coast and the West Coast divide in Canada is quite similar to the East and West Coast divide in the U.S. as well. So there's a lot of similarity like that. Canada, their favorite sport is hockey, and in the US it's American football, but there's a lot of people in Canada that follow US sports as well. Like they watch the NBA, they watch NFL. So there's a lot of following in that sense as well, but obviously there's more of an emphasis towards hockey. Um, there's differences in the biggest differences between the political setups in both countries. So, in Canada, it's more a parliamentary system, and in the U.S., it's a presidential system. So that's where the systems, differ. There's a lot of differences between the societies and the way they've been set up, the societal structure of both countries. So I would say, just to generalize, I would say the rich in the US are richer than the ones in Canada, and the poor in the US are poorer than the ones in Canada. That means there's more support for the poor people in Canada than there is for the US. There's more inequality, I believe, in the US. So, yes, in that sense, I believe if you're professional, if you're more qualified, it might make more sense to like live in someplace in the US if you want to save more money than in Canada. But if you want peace of life and if money isn't the only thing for you, then Canada is a more peaceful option. So, those are some of the differences. I honestly believe that people in the US, in the work culture, are a little bit more driven, a little bit more ambitious. Their economy is bigger. There's more competitive work environment. It's more cutthroat in the US. They're willing to take more chances, and they are not as risk averse as Canadians are. In Canada, they're more risk averse. They're safer with their jobs. There's not an incentive for taking a lot of risk, and as a result of that, the salaries in the U.S. are much higher than the ones in Canada. Whereas the the cost of living in Canada is quite comparable to the cost of living in the U.S. In certain places, it might be more than the U.S. even, but yeah, Canada is generally expensive, but I guess you can find cheaper places to live in Canada as well, but they're not going to be the big urban centers like Vancouver and Toronto. And even even like those places, I believe, would probably be a little bit more expensive than the cheapest places in the U.S. You have places like Texas in the U.S. that are seeing a lot of growth, and cost of living is not that expensive. Real estate is still much cheaper in those parts of the U.S. than it is in other parts of Canada. So Canada is a more expensive country to live in, I believe, but you see a more peaceful society. You see different cultures, different nationalities of people living together. You see a lot of ethnicities, and you see people coexist peacefully side by side. In the US, there's a lot of tension between different races, different groups. You have a little bit more racism that is prevalent on the streets. In Canada, you might have racism as well, but it's not as prevalent. And there's just a little bit more peace of mind in Canada. So those are some of the similarities and differences that I see between Canada and the US. If you have any questions, or if you would like to have specific questions answered about Canada versus the US, I would love to share my opinions, and just leave your comments in the comment section below. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.